A bolt from the blue. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz announced that Ukraine is receiving long-range missiles, weapons capable of breaking through enemy defenses where they least expect it. But the technological storm is only just beginning. The famous anti-aircraft systems have already arrived in Ukraine. Now all the enemy's deadly iron will be sent to the scrap heap. Then Spain, it's simply a shock. Madrid has rolled out unprecedented military aid, strengthening the Ukrainian army to such an extent that the Kremlin is already in a panic. Don't miss the explosive details right now.
Even more aid and support, the German Chancellor has promised to equip the Ukrainian army with long-range weapon systems. But Merz did not disclose details about the number of missiles or the delivery timelines.
For months, we have been working intensively with the Ukrainian government on implementing long-range fire projects, as we call them technically. The Ukrainian army will be equipped with such weapon systems.
At the same time, the Chancellor refused to answer a question about Germany's previous reluctance to supply Ukraine with Taurus long-range cruise missiles. He called this approach a tactic to increase pressure on the aggressor country, Russia.
The operation of the Taurus missiles directly depends on the level of training of the technical personnel. That is apparently the main point here, is that only Bundeswehr servicemen who are members of the German armed forces are currently able to use the Taurus missiles. Additionally, it would require quite a significant amount of time to properly train Ukrainian specialists so that they could safely and effectively operate these advanced missile systems on their own.
Germany is the largest European donor of military aid to Ukraine. Since the beginning of the war, the government has provided Ukraine with assistance totaling more than 50 billion euros. In September, Berlin launched a new initiative to procure long-range drones jointly with Ukraine's defense industry. Germany will also allocate an additional 150 million euros to purchase weapons from the US for Kyiv.
Germany is well aware of the possibilities of direct military confrontation with the Russian Federation. That is why it is deeply invested in ensuring the defense capability of the Ukrainian state and accordingly in the technical rearmament of Ukraine's defense forces.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Air Force has strengthened its air defense with the new British Terrahawk Paladin weapon system. The number of units delivered has not been disclosed, but even a small batch of such systems will significantly bolster Ukraine's air defense.
For the Ukrainian side, this means creating a so-called focal air defense system to protect key logistical and military facilities from being hit by the enemy's aerodynamic weapons. First and foremost, this refers to UAVs. This system is highly mobile and, accordingly, can be easily redeployed to any location. Given its autonomous operation, this significantly increases Ukraine's ability to counter threats, particularly from the Russian Federation.
Spain will also allocate 615 million euros to support Ukraine, the lion's share of which is earmarked specifically for military needs. In the
first place, this is a program for additional arms purchases for the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces from the United States. The second is accordingly the strengthening of Ukraine's air defense systems. And accordingly, this also includes logistical and technical support, including the transfer by Spain of heavy armored vehicles and weaponry that are currently in service with the Spanish army.
Since the start of the full-scale war, Ukraine has ramped up weapons production and the implementation of new technologies, which are already being used on the front lines. The volume of domestic weapons production has increased tenfold.
Ukraine has scaled up production of the Bogdana self-propelled artillery systems to 20 units per month. These are record numbers even for NATO countries. A distinctive feature is that it uses a modified 155mm caliber, which is the NATO standard, plus accordingly the price-to-quality ratio. In addition, Ukraine's defense forces have increased artillery shell production, and the increase has been record-breaking. There is also talk of scaling up the production of both FPV drones and accordingly strike drones with a target range of over 1,500 kilometers.
Earlier, Volodymyr Zelensky stated that domestic weapons production, particularly of ballistic systems and drones, is one of the key tasks for the government and manufacturers.
It is worth noting the scaling up of production of electronic warfare systems and radars. In this segment as well, Ukrainian defense holds one of the leading positions in the world, and accordingly the production of maritime drones.
All of this means that Ukrainian developers have demonstrated the ability to create high-precision weaponry capable of destroying important enemy military targets deep behind the front lines.
Sensational! The end of the war. Trump's special representative for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, shocked everyone. The world press is full of headlines. It's a trap. The Geneva negotiations are in the spotlight. The world's great powers are seeking a compromise that could become the final touch for long-awaited peace or disaster. Find out more right now.
The Geneva talks on Trump's peace plan are of crucial importance. Representatives from the US, Ukraine, and national security advisors from France, the UK, and Germany participated in discussions on the American proposal to end the war in Ukraine.
Ukraine is approaching this process with a clear understanding of its interests. This is another stage in the ongoing dialogue of recent days, primarily aimed at coordinating a shared vision for the next steps.
Trump's aides, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, attended the meeting.
The meeting was the most productive and substantive of all those held so far. In
the Ukrainian president's office, they are ready to work as quickly as possible to achieve real peace.
Ukraine never wanted this war and will do everything to end it with an honorable peace. Ukraine will never be an obstacle to peace, and representatives of the Ukrainian state will defend the just interests of the Ukrainian people and the foundations of European security. We are grateful for the willingness of our European partners to help.
Ukraine's allies are seeking to rewrite Trump's proposal, which they believe would benefit Russia. They disagree with at least 4 points.
We firmly adhere to the principle that borders should not be changed by force. We are also concerned about the proposed restrictions on Ukraine's armed forces, which would make Ukraine vulnerable to future attacks. This is tantamount to military castration and leaves Ukraine perpetually vulnerable to a third invasion.
European leaders agreed to use the draft as a basis and expressed their willingness to work on it together.
We have very good progress, and we are moving toward a just and lasting peace. Ukrainians deserve peace more than anyone else on this planet. We believe that our great friend, the United States, especially President Trump and his team, will confirm this peace.
Keith Kellogg is confident that Trump will be able to end this war.
The foundation of the agreement has already been established. We are almost on the home stretch to ending the war. There are things in the plan that should be spelled out and explained more clearly. There will also be security guarantees, with the United States as the main guarantor in order to avoid the mistakes of the Budapest Memorandum and the Minsk agreements.
Right now, the media are reporting that Trump has appointed Driscoll, a friend and former classmate of Vice President J.D. Vance, as his new special representative. It is quite possible that he will work in parallel with Keith Kellogg, who may leave the administration in January. Washington continues to insist on advancing its 28-point plan. According to the plan, Ukraine must make territorial concessions to Russia and reduce its army. The US and Europe pledged to finance the reconstruction of Ukraine. Sanctions on the Russian Federation are being lifted gradually, and Moscow and Washington are signing an agreement on long-term economic cooperation.
This is not our recommendation, this is not our peace plan. This is a proposal that was received, and as mediators we agreed to share it. And we did not make it public. It leaked. It was not made public by our members or our representatives.
Donald Trump believes that Ukraine may decide to sign the peace plan on November 27th before Thanksgiving. But when meeting with journalists, he clarified that his peace plan is far from a final proposal.
No, it is far from final. We would like to achieve peace. This should have happened a long time ago. The war between Ukraine and Russia should never have happened. If I had been president, this would never have happened. We are trying to end it. One way or another, we have to end it.
On Friday, President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the people of Ukraine, stating in a heartfelt message that Ukraine now faces a very difficult and challenging choice and risks either losing its national dignity or its most important and key international partner.
This is one of the most difficult moments in our history. Right now, the pressure on Ukraine is among the heaviest it has ever been. Right now, Ukraine may be facing a very difficult choice. Either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner.
Sources close to the Kremlin say that the provisions of this document should be seen more as a basis for a future agreement, rather than as an agreement that Putin will officially sign.
If Kyiv does not want to discuss President Trump's proposal and ultimately refuses to accept it, then both they and the European warmongers must fully understand that the events that took place in Kupiansk will inevitably be repeated, and on other key sections of the front as well. Maybe not as quickly as we would like, but inevitably it will keep happening. And overall, that suits us. Moscow objects to the proposed security guarantees for Ukraine, the size of its army, and the use of frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. We have this text.
We have this text. We received it through the existing channels of communication with the American administration. I believe that it could also serve as a basis for a final peaceful settlement.
The Kremlin is creating informational conditions to reject the agreement, since Russia is not interested in making territorial concessions, according to the American Institute for the Study of War.
A Russian victory is not inevitable. Ukraine and the West can exploit several key Russian weaknesses to force the Kremlin to negotiate and make real concessions.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin is facing growing problems with material and human resources, which will continue to complicate Moscow's ability to sustain the war as it drags on. Therefore, the Russian Federation is very interested in forcing Ukraine to surrender critically important territories that the Russian military is unlikely to be able to capture. That is why Gerasimov, when reporting the situation at the front to Putin, continues to exaggerate successes, and Putin plays along in order to force Ukraine and the West to accept Russia's demands in negotiations.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The front is ablaze, the occupiers are boiling in the cauldron of war. 3 enemy platoons have been destroyed in a day. In Pokrovsk, the Russians have broken through again, but the city still stands. The Ukrainian armed forces have once again surprised everyone and accomplished the incredible. The enemy's offensive in southern Ukraine has faded into oblivion, while on the Kupiansk direction, Ukraine's defenders have surged forward. The defense forces are managing to strike not only along the front line, but also behind enemy lines. Another Mi-8 helicopter down, and the occupied territories have also taken a hit. Part of the Donetsk region has been plunged into darkness. This has paralyzed the occupiers' troops. More on what is happening at the front and around it at this very moment coming up next.
In the past day, 3 platoons have been eliminated and more than a platoon wounded. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces has shared details about the fighting for Pokrovsk. Thus, the defense forces destroyed exactly 60 Russian assault troops who, under the cover of fog, tried to advance toward the city center and gain a foothold. Another 23 people were wounded. As a result, the occupiers' attempt to break through failed. At the same time, the enemy still holds the old positions they captured a few days earlier. According to the Ukrainian Armed Forces Command, search and assault operations are currently underway, and the entire city essentially remains a gray zone.
The enemy, who entered through the southern outskirts of Pokrovsk, has already carried out the establishment of a certain bridgehead there. The bridgehead is already being supplied logistically. Accordingly, the gray zone is very large, probably most of the city today, although the lines on the northern edge of the city in the northern part of Pokrovsk are still being held today, particularly by our paratroopers.
Another direction that regularly appears in military reports is the Kupiansk area. Despite Gerasimov's report about the encirclement of around 5,000 Ukrainian soldiers there, our command denies this information, instead reporting successes and advances by the defense forces.
Today it has not yet been possible to push the enemy out of Kupiansk itself, but the counter-attacking actions that the defense forces are demonstrating now are gradual advances. These are not any sudden counter-offensive operations, but rather counter-attacking actions. Nevertheless, they are leading to our defense forces being able to regain some tactical positions that had been lost there several months ago, right in the city of Kupiansk itself.
The Russians have also become more active in the south of our country. The Zaporizhzhia direction, from where the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine was drawing reserves to Pokrovsk, had been bringing rather alarming news for several weeks. However, the situation has now been stabilized.
The active offensive that, as they declared a week ago, was taking place is no longer happening. Now we are conducting strikes and firepower against the reserves. What is especially important is that now they have started destroying the railway that supplies these groups.
Analysts say the situation in Zaporizhzhia remains difficult. The enemy continues to concentrate forces and, with sabotage groups, is infiltrating villages under Ukrainian control near the Kakhovka reservoir. However, these attacks fail time and again.
The Russians once again failed to take Stepnohirsk or even the multi-story buildings in the southern part of the settlement. Only part of the houses are under enemy control. Additional pressure on Stepnohirsk is created by the enemy's attempts to break through along the road to Hrihorivka. To the north of the seaside dashas, there is a large open area, so the Russians don't even try to gain a foothold there. Instead, taking great risks, they dash a bit further north, where there is a building and at least some kind of trench line.
But when advancing in open fields, the enemy suffers colossal losses thanks to our artillery, which is why the occupiers are no longer given vehicles and are sent into the assault exclusively on foot. At the same time, our defense forces managed to strike not only along the front line, but also deep in the Russian rear. In particular, the past day was marked by an unprecedented event. Special Operations Forces shot down a Russian Mi-8 military helicopter with a long-range drone right on Russian territory. As noted by the agency, this opens a new chapter in the war, giving the Ukrainian armed forces unprecedented capabilities.
The point is that previously Ukrainians shot down helicopters in the air using regular FPV drones with a maximum range of several dozen kilometers and warheads weighing 1.5 kilograms. In this case, we see that it wasn't necessary to ram the drone into the helicopter, thanks to the powerful warhead. But on the other hand, as you can see, this is happening at a different altitude, where regular FPV drones probably wouldn't reach. And very importantly, according to some sources, though this still needs to be verified, this is happening at a very long distance. So in this case, it's the Rostov region, the Kutenikovo area. And what is Kutenikovo? Well, basically, it's 200 kilometers from the line of contact.
The occupied territories were also affected. Part of the Donetsk region was plunged into a total blackout, which partially paralyzed the command of Russian forces. Among more than a dozen successful strikes, the explosions in Dokuchevsk are worth noting. Analysts are still debating. Was the nighttime glow the result of a hit on a power station or an ammunition depot?
Whatever it was, either one is ultimately a blow to logistics, because if a substation is destroyed, the group loses electricity. If the strike hits ammunition supplies, the group loses shells. This is important for the group that is currently advancing in Donetsk region. In other words, at the very least, it slows down their offensive potential.
At the same time, fighters on the ground confirm this information. In particular, due to intensified strikes on Russian logistics in the Donetsk region, assault units have lost their steady supply of reserves and weapons and have lost momentum in their advance in Pokrovsk as well.